What led the Pope to mention Donald Trump? Was it a prophetic vision, a divine revelation, or a warning about the future? These questions are at the heart of the investigation in this video, which analyzes the intriguing words of Pope John Paul III in his final days of life. Some revelations have the power to challenge our deepest beliefs, especially when they occur during moments of great reflection in the final moments of one's earthly journey. The Pope's words resonated beyond the walls of the Vatican, carrying messages that still raise questions today. Imagine the Vatican, a symbol of tradition and spirituality, immersed in an atmosphere of solemnity. Pope John Paul I, a leader of faith and resistance, spent his last days in company, remaining steadfast in his mission to guide humanity despite his weakening health. His reflections deepened unexpectedly, and Donald Trump emerged in his thoughts. The last words of Pope John Paul I revolved around the gospel and divine mercy. He often mentioned the episode of Thomas, the disciple who doubted the resurrection of Christ until he saw the marks of the nails. For the Pope, this story symbolized the infinite patience of God and his willingness to provide signs of his grace, even in the face of doubt. However, one of the most enigmatic aspects of his last words was the reference to Trump. At that time, the businessman was known primarily for his career in business and entertainment, with no direct involvement in politics. Nevertheless, something in his figure caught the attention of the pontiff, prompting followers and scholars to interpret this mention in various ways. Some believe that Pope John Paul III saw traits in Trump that could significantly influence the global stage, while others argue that the Pope had a prophetic vision about the political events to come. This mention sparked and stimulated multiple analyses about the meaning of those words. To better understand the context in which they were spoken, it is essential to look back in time and observe the world stage of that period. Faith and politics have always been intertwined throughout history, and Pope John Paul I had a sharp vision of the role of leaders in the destiny of humanity. His emphasis on mercy and his reflections on contemporary figures reveal his concern for the future and the impact of human decisions. On April 2, 2005, in the moments leading up to his death, Pope John Paul III was deeply immersed in prayer and meditation, even as he faced intense pain. His attention remained focused on humanity. His final messages, filled with spiritual teachings, were fully understood only after his passing, consolidating a legacy that continues to inspire reflection. Surrounded by his closest attendants, he dedicated his last days to writing, leaving guidance and warnings for the world. Many of these records remained unpublished until after his death, revealing his concern for the moral and spiritual challenges of modern society. Pope John Paul I's devotion was evident in every aspect of his life, but it intensified in his final moments. He saw suffering not as a burden, but as a means to connect more deeply with Christ. In his prayers, he asked for strength and wisdom, not for himself, but for those who would continue to guide the Church and face the challenges of the world. The Pope warned about the rise of secularism and moral relativism, which, according to him, threatened the spiritual foundation of humanity. In his last words, he emphasized the need to trust in God's mercy and the importance of resisting the temptations of materialism. He urged the faithful to return to prayer, to assume active roles in defending the faith, and to cultivate justice and goodness. Among his most striking reflections, he envisioned a period of intense spiritual battle in which the followers of faith would have to demonstrate resilience. His final message was not only a warning, but also a call to hope. Even amid adversity, divine mercy would be the path to true peace. Pope John Paul I emphasized that in a fragmented world plagued by conflict, forgiveness and reconciliation were essential for unity. He used the gospel story of Thomas to illustrate the challenge of faith in the modern world, showing that, just as Christ offered evidence of his resurrection, God continues to give us signs of his presence. But what do these words mean for us today? Why did the Pope mention Trump amid such profound teachings? And how can we interpret his reflections in a world that continues to face uncertainty and divisions? These are questions that still resonate, inviting us to look to the past for answers to the present. In his final moments, Pope John Paul I repeatedly, fervently said, "Jesus, I trust in you, for us, and for the whole world." This simple yet meaningful phrase summed up his belief in God's redeeming mercy and expressed his plea for humanity, in times of suffering and sin. As his health deteriorated, his thoughts increasingly turned toward the future. He envisioned a world facing unprecedented spiritual and moral challenges, anticipating a rise in the influence of evil and the need for Christians to remain vigilant and firm. He warned that as humanity advanced in technology and economics, spiritual complacency would increase, and moral values would gradually be lost. Even with such warnings, his message was one of hope. Pope John Paul V believed that with faith, prayer, and obedience to the divine commandments, humanity could overcome such trials. In the final moments of his life, when he had no strength to speak, he continued praying in silence, meditating on the redemption of the world and the strength needed for the faithful to resist temptation. His unwavering dedication and love for humanity were reflected in every prayer and meditation. Among his final meditations, the Pope found comfort and inspiration in the Gospel of John, where the risen Christ appears to the apostles and shows them the marks of the nails in his hands. For him, this scene symbolized the essence of divine love and mercy, a legacy he wished to leave. This narration occurs 8 days after the resurrection, when Jesus appears to the disciples gathered in a locked room, filled with fear and uncertainty. Thomas, absent in the first appearance, doubted the testimony of the other disciples and said he would only believe if he could see and touch the wounds of Christ. When Jesus returns and invites him to touch his scars, Thomas abandons his disbelief and proclaims, "My Lord and my God." The significance of this account goes beyond the event itself. It teaches that true faith does not depend on visible proof, as emphasized in 2 Corinthians 5:7. We live by faith, not by sight. For 3 years, the disciples were physically with Jesus, but the time came to learn to trust in his spiritual presence. Thomas's doubt reflects the search for concrete evidence, something common even today. Initially, Thomas demanded proof to believe in the resurrection. However, when invited by Jesus to touch his wounds, the need for evidence disappeared, and he recognized the divinity of Christ without hesitation. However, Jesus emphasized that faith goes beyond what can be seen, because blessed are those who have not seen and have believed. With these words, Christ blessed those who believe without needing tangible signs, highlighting a deeper and more authentic faith. Pope John Paul III saw in this lesson a fundamental principle for the Church in modern times. For him, genuine faith was not based on physical proof, but on full trust in God's mercy and love. The transformation of Thomas symbolized the journey he wished all Christians would embark upon, especially in an increasingly skeptical and uncertain world. His teaching was clear. The resurrection of Christ is the source of hope and redemption, even in the darkest moments. Reflecting on this passage from the Gospel, the Pope emphasized the need for unshakable faith in a world full of doubts. He recognized that Thomas's unbelief resonated with contemporary uncertainties, reinforcing the importance of a personal encounter with Christ, even without his physical presence. His message was a call to humanity to accept the redemption offered by the Gospel and to trust in the constant presence of Christ in their lives. The final words and thoughts of Pope John Paul I became a lasting spiritual legacy, inspiring generations to strengthen their faith. However, amid these deep reflections, an unexpected element emerged, a mention of Donald Trump. At the time of the Pope's death in 2005, Trump was widely recognized as a business magnate and television personality, still distant from the political role he would later play. Nonetheless, among the Pope's observations, there were enigmatic references to him, suggesting that he would play a significant role. Pope John Paul I's words about Trump were recorded vaguely, but filled with meaning. He mentioned the businessman in the context of future global events, implying that he would hold a position of great influence and have a decisive impact on the course of history. This posthumous revelation sparked debates and speculations. What could the Pope have seen in Trump that justified such a mention? These questions remain open, inviting us to interpret the possible meanings embedded in the Pope's final words. To understand what led Pope John Paul I to mention Donald Trump, it is essential to consider the role of prophecies and the responsibility of spiritual leaders in interpreting divine messages. Known for his deep spirituality and his ability to discern the will of God, Pope John Paul III conveyed reflections that went beyond the present. Thus, his references to Trump must be analyzed from the perspective of spiritual discernment and prophetic vision. Within the Catholic tradition, prophecy often reveals events that reflect divine plans and warnings. Therefore, the Pope's observations about Trump can be interpreted as an inspired vision that anticipated future events. Pope John Paul I was not referring to Trump solely as an individual, but also to the potential impact his rise would have on the global stage. His reflections suggested that Trump would play a highly relevant role, influencing not only politics, but also the cultural and spiritual aspects of society. He anticipated a period of significant transformations in which Trump's actions would serve as catalysts for both positive and challenging changes. This duality is common in prophetic messages, reflecting the complexity of human free will and divine providence. After the Pope's death, Trump's ascension to the presidency of the United States partially confirmed the anticipation of drastic changes. His administration generated profound impacts, both domestically and globally. To understand his role in history, a balanced analysis is needed that considers both his achievements and the controversies that marked his government. His supporters highlight advances such as strengthening national security, economic growth, and his defiant stance against the political establishment. On the other hand, his critics point out the polarizing nature of his policies, his inflammatory rhetoric, and the ethical issues associated with his administration. From a prophetic perspective, Trump's presidency can be seen as the materialization of Pope John Paul I's predictions, bringing with it deep changes and driving fundamental debates. His decisions had repercussions across various spheres of society, leading to both advances and challenges. Regardless of opinions for or against, it is undeniable that his figure marked the course of world events. Trump's presidency left an indelible mark on US and international politics, and the intense reactions to his actions highlighted the need for profound reflection on moral and ethical values in politics. This aspect resonates with the prophetic visions of Pope John Paul I, who emphasized the duality of historical impacts and the importance of discernment in times of transformation. A fundamental element of his administration was his relationship with religious communities. Trump gained support from those groups who saw his policies as a defense of their principles and beliefs. This factor may have been considered by Pope John Paul I in his visions, as he always stressed the need to preserve spiritual values in difficult times. His call for mercy and love served as a guide, encouraging the faithful to maintain faith and compassion regardless of the circumstances. The Pope's message on divine mercy is a prism through which Trump's impact can be analyzed from a spiritual perspective. The mention of the businessman was not limited to the political realm. It functioned as a reminder of the need for moral and spiritual reflection. If you liked this analysis, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this.